Hello again, this is Brian Strickland with the Construction Management Department at UTC. It was a pleasure meeting with the RP community crew this morning, and I wanted to work up a quick PowerPoint for you to further illustrate the project that I briefly talked about in the meeting today. And I'm working on a much more polished video for this project for March, but I thought I need to jump on it and show you something as soon as possible. And as I described it, this project was more about professional communication between three diverse areas of the construction industry, and three areas that on a typical job must communicate and work together efficiently and effectively to end up with the final result. And this final result was going to be a concrete bench. But again, the primary focus was not about the design of the bench. It was not about the final product of the bench. It was more about how to professionally communicate between those three disciplines. All right, so to begin with, what really inspired this project is my conversations with our faculty advisory committee, which are all professionals in the construction community in Chattanooga, and them stating that our guys just don't get any experience building anything. And that was kind of one of the reasons I was hired. And so as we started building things, we were using the engineering shop, and it was just really muddled circumstances. So I applied for grants to get our department more tools. And then secondly, working with Chris Frischkozy in civil engineering, his guys are making all these concrete beams, and essentially when they're done with them, they just throw them away. And we thought, well, surely there's something constructive we can do with all this material and all their know-how. So one of the first things we did, this is Chris Frischkozy up here with civil engineering in the top left, utterly indispensable for me with this project. And in this particular, this is a structures class, a junior level structures class, and we were talking about concrete beams, and we were theorizing where the rebar should be, whether towards the bottom, towards the middle, or towards the top. And of course, theorizing is never a very good idea. So we poured some simple concrete beams, and we had a control with no rebar. We had rebar towards the bottom, we had rebar in the center, and we had rebar towards the top. And we just used cheap, inexpensive Quikrete for this, so they were all consistent. Then, after they had their proper curing time, another part of this project is that they had to accurately place these bolts into the concrete that fit base plate. Sadly, none of their base plates fit, but that's another story. So we took our beams to the civil engineering lab here, and we commenced to break them to figure out if our theory would hold true about where the rebar should be.
Yeah. There it goes. That's a failure.
Well, that was more exciting. Turns out our theory was correct, and after we broke them, we inspected them and did more theorizing. All right, so for the next part of this project, actually getting into the bench, Chris Frischkozy and I went over to the interior architecture department where they were having a class this semester called Ideation and Visualization, so it fits in perfectly. And they came up with plans and did sketches and concept sketches and ideas for all different types of benches. And Chris and I basically just sat there with them and said, no, that's not practical for this project. That's just not going to work. That's not practical. That's just ugly. That's stupid. You know how the process goes. That is wonderful. What a fantastic project. I want to build that one. And then they went to the next step of developing that particular idea that we ended up with. They elaborated on that more. Chris telling them more about concrete than they ever wanted to know. And then so they came up with some basic, let's call them construction documents for this concrete bench with basic dimensions on them. And this came over to my guys and also to civil engineering. After they came up with these ideas, these two people here are they're the head of facilities here at UTC, and anything that's permanently placed anywhere or built anywhere on goes through them, and they were our client. So not only do we have the communication between the architect, the designers, the contractor, and the engineers, but they acted as our customer, and so they chose the final design or the final 3 designs for this. And since, like I said before, I applied for a grant, I got our guys more tools, and we're working out in the courtyard. And before we could build this concrete bench, my guys don't have a whole lot of building experience, and we didn't have anything to actually work on top of, so I had them all build sawhorses, and it fit along our lines of discussing beams and trusses and triangles and that sort of thing. And some of our final products. And then my guys went through some of these drawings where they had lots of questions, and they created an RFI that would go back to the designer to refine what their design intent was, and basically, obviously, you know, pointing out some of those ubiquitous designer dimensions that were left out. Engineers did what engineers do best, is they made calculations for all the material for these benches. They designed the mix, and I know it's not that difficult to get a 4-foot concrete bench to hold up 2 people. However, that's part of their job, is to do all the calculations, and they created the very specific mix needed for how that bench needed to perform. And then my guys ran with it, and they started discussing the plans of how they were going to build it, but we just used OSB for the forms, knowing that it's going to leave an ugly finish and all. But OSB's cheap, and they messed up a lot, so that's why we were using OSB. And yes, this girl is wearing safety glasses. You just can't see them. For any of the safety police out there. We continued to discuss rebar. They had no idea how they were going to bend the rebar, and they had to figure that out. It forced them to do a lot of on-the-fly thinking of, you're on the job site, you got to bend some rebar, get to it. And we used this pink foam to create some of the voids in there. So when I show you what came out of our molds, and you see all this roughness on it, it's more the pink mold than the concrete in a lot of places. So this bench comes apart in 3 different places. So that was probably one of the most difficult things for them, is to create. There's basically bolts that come out of this, 1/2-inch bolts that come out of that and insert through this planter, and it bolts into that. And then these legs are coming up through the form here, and they go into this other leg, where these are pulled out after the concrete is cured, and these are epoxied into the other end. And the final product ended up like this. Yes, we have our ugly OSB finish. It needs a little bit of muriatic acid and cleanup, and there's a lot of that pink foam still stuck to it. But this is the basic gist of it. And in the end, this bench is being donated and transported to Ivy Academy in Soddy Daisy, and it will be placed on their campus, because they have greenhouses and plants and that sort of thing that they can put into the planter. And that was this latest project. We just completed that before Christmas, and like I said, I'm making a more elaborate video and information on it, and we're presenting this project to a couple of different conferences. And next fall, our big plans, this semester was just the preliminary fledgling practice run of this project, and we're hoping that next semester we can maybe have 4 different teams all building 4 different benches, and that these benches would have sponsors for each team and add add a higher level of competition to it. Chris has landed some donations from a particular concrete company here in town. I can't remember what it is, but I think they will be donating most of the concrete. And like I told Mr. Thomas, Mr. Todd, and Mrs. Severson in the meeting today, you know, what we really need is just simple, basic building materials for this. And any other kind of advice and expertise that could be brought to my guys while they're building it would be great. I think any kind of funding could really bump up this project. I think it's a great project for them to get real world experience between the communication. And a lot of these guys, they go through school, they get an office job, and they never touch any construction materials at all. So this gives them a really good hands-on idea. They understand that guy in the field of why he took half a day to place those 4 bolts in the concrete. They start to understand why. They understand materials a little better, and mostly that a simple rectangular form is far more complicated than they expected. That's the best lesson they get out of this class. That's what I heard continually is, who knew a rectangular box was so difficult to build? Who knew laying out 4 bolts was so difficult to get right? So that's the big eye-opener for them. There's also a big opportunity for some type of corporate marketing, obviously, with these benches. I mean, we could easily CNC cut the logo of RP Communities, and it is inset into the planter over there on that side, or it's inset right across the top of the bench. This bench provided with funds through RP Communities, so forth and so on. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, for marketing these benches and placing them either around town, at schools, or here on campus. Next fall, we're hoping to work it out with facilities to place it on campus, but that's apparently a lengthy process. Thank you for taking the initiative on your end to come talk to us today, and anything that you could remotely volunteer would be very helpful for this class. And I really appreciate and look forward to any further collaboration with you. Thanks again. Bye.